as a caregiver. Got it. So I want to just start by introducing our guests. Well, everyone can say hello, but the caregivers that we have here, everybody, it's interesting. There's a lot of dads here, but everybody had children at very different ages, which I think is really interesting. Rowan, you had 4 kids when your wife was going through breast cancer. Jason had a baby, a newborn baby. Was that the only baby you had at home, or did you have another child?
No, we had a 2-year-old when she was diagnosed, but she was pregnant. So when she was diagnosed, she was pregnant, but then she started her treatment right after our second was born.
We want to hear about that story.
She had surgery while she was pregnant.
Right. I remember. Chin, so Maya must have been 3 when we met you at the beginning. Oh, you're on mute. And I know you're saying
like 5 times a day for me on mute during Zoom meetings. Yeah, Amaya was 2 when we were diagnosed, and yeah, when we met you, she had turned 3 already.
So really different experiences. Nicole Thomas, one of our board members, wave, hello down there. Nicole's caring for her mom right now. So obviously a different experience, but we want to, hear about that as well. Nikia Clark is our new Director of Patient Services and Outreach at the Ellie Fund. This is what happens when you volunteer for the Ellie Fund. We really suck you in, and then you get a job offer, and now you're here forever. And Nikia was a caregiver for her mom, and also an Ellie Fund patient. So she has a great perspective to share. And our dearest friend, Sandy McLaughlin, who is our social worker extraordinaire from MGH, who sends us all kinds of patients and also has thought out of the box when her patients need something that we don't typically cover. She has come up with some incredible suggestions that really make a difference in her patients' lives. So we'll hope that you all talk about that. Did I forget anyone? Okay, so I want us to actually start with Sandy, because you speak with patients, and without betraying any confidences whatsoever, I'm really curious, do your patients share with you what they wish their spouse or adult child or caregiver would do or wouldn't do?
Oftentimes, yes.
We thought so.
It's one of the hard things is everyone is a little bit different, and what patients need is different based on who the patient is and where they are. Some patients sort of love that the first thing that people ask them when they're talking is, how are you doing? The quote unquote, how are you doing? And other people say, ask about the kids, ask about other things. Patients worry a lot about their spouses, their kids, their family members, and the impact of their cancer on their families. And fortunately, I also get to meet a lot with family members. And one of the things when I'm talking with caregivers, the first thing I say is, think about that message when you get on an airplane. What do they say? If in the event of an emergency, put the oxygen mask on yourself. And I think a lot of times caregivers just sort of give everything, but if you don't also take care of your needs and get breaks that are important for you, it's impossible to sustain in the care in the way that most people want to be able to be there. So I think really looking at what are the things that are important to you, and then, sort of asking sort of your family member what they feel like would be helpful, because sometimes they don't know, and sometimes they have some ideas of things that might be. The other thing I often think about with caregivers, I think sometimes there's an impotence that people feel when a loved one is going through cancer treatment. You can't do the chemo, you can't do the surgery, you can't do the radiation. You can only love and support. And sometimes that doesn't feel like it's enough, but it's the most important thing, I think, for patients going through cancer treatment is that love and that connection and that support. And it may not feel like it's enough, but it really is such an important thing. So I think I'll for now.
That's amazing. Nicole, I just want to ask you directly, in caring for someone else, based on what Sandy said, I remember when it was my turn, I felt like my needs weren't as important as anybody who was going through cancer. So how could you possibly complain, or how could you prioritize anything about yourself when this person is in real danger? What's your reaction to that?
Yeah, I would say I've been in this journey with my mom now for going on 3 years. And so unfortunately I learned that the hard way, and it is really hard. Like to your point, like, nothing compares. You watch your loved one going through chemo and surgery and all these different treatments, and you think like, why I have no reason to complain. My needs aren't that important. I'll take care of myself later. And unfortunately, late last year, 2021, I literally made myself sick, and to the point where I couldn't take care of my mom. Like I reached that point where I had completely depleted myself to the point where I couldn't care for my mom in the way that I wanted to, and the way that she needed me to. And so that was that much harder for me. And so, the things that people were telling me all along of take care of yourself first, still make time for yourself. I heard it, and it went in one ear and went out the other. But unfortunately I learned it the hard way. And so now I try to do much better with that, but also share that with other people. Like it is so important. You will literally make yourself sick if you don't take that time to take care of yourself. And to Sandy's point of the patient also worries about the caregiver. The last thing I wanted in that moment was for my mom, who needed to be focused on herself, to be worried about me. And so obviously, any mom's gonna care about their child, but she had in my head more important things that she needed to be worried about rather than me being sick. And so, I've learned the lesson and definitely have changed my perspective as we're still going through treatment. And now I make sure to prioritize myself as best as I can, so that hopefully we never get to that point again.
Nicole, when you said about, she's got other things to do and focus on other than sort of what's going on for you. But again, moms want a mother and want to be active. And it also sometimes helps the patient who's going through treatment to feel like there's some normal role development, like being a parent or being a wife or being a worker and those kinds of things. So those also can be really helpful things for people going through stuff.
Yeah, I agree.
The role reversal is something that we talk about a lot. And, Rowan, I think your situation is just the most interesting, given that you are a firefighter and your wife was a nurse, and, first responders, and then your wife becomes a patient, and the roles completely change. And I'm really wondering, as someone who's a professional caregiver like that, what was the hardest part about that for you? How did you sort of let that happen so that you could accept help?
I think one of the hardest things is, as a firefighter, you're used to you're not exactly fixing things. Well, sometimes you're fixing things on the fire side, but on the EMS side, you take care of the patient for a few minutes, and then you take them to the hospital to a higher level of care, and you give them to somebody else to take care of. So I think one of the hardest things I felt was, first off, that I couldn't fix it. Whatever, there was nothing I could do to fix it. And that was frustrating for me. And the other thing was that I was now taking care of Kim a lot more than the other patients, you know what I mean? And it's totally different. I mean, it's a family member now. So and it's not, I'm not doing it as in a professional role. It's doing it as a family member. And it was hard. It was really hard. It was frustrating. Like I said, because I couldn't fix it, but it was also just not, sometimes not even knowing what to do, and Kim was great because she was, in my opinion, she was a pretty easy patient, because she was pretty easygoing about stuff. She wasn't really demanding. A lot of the times, like you said, they don't even know what they need a lot of times. So you can't ask them. You can ask them, but they say, I don't know. And that's like, what do you do for somebody that doesn't know? Except, like Sandy said, you're just there, you support them, you take care of them, and you do the best you can. But it was super frustrating, really.
Was it even harder for the two of you to accept help, do you think, because you're so used to being the help that you maybe were uncomfortable asking or uncomfortable accepting?
I would say more so for Kim than for me. Kim being the patient, even with Kim not being the patient, just Kim as a person is not very used to asking for help. She's just the kind of person that goes and does, and she's the one that gives the help, as on a professional basis, and at home as the mom, she's doing a lot more than I am. She just does stuff, I don't know how they just seem to know how to do all this stuff, but it wasn't as hard for me. I'm a lot more apt to ask, maybe to ask for help, yes, but also to ask questions. And I'll say, well, what did they tell you to do? Well, they didn't really say. Oh, well, what do you mean they didn't say? And I'd get on the phone and call and talk to somebody, whereas Kim would be like, no, don't bother anybody. I'm like, bother anybody? You got to be kidding me. So
Chin, we went back and watched the video that you and Alyssa did for us. And I just wrote down, and I've been doing research about caregivers, and you talked about confusion and how confused you were upon diagnosis. And part of it being, do you accept help from people and when? And I'd love for you to share with everyone, that was hard for you both to accept help, and somehow you did it, thank goodness. What would you say about that decision?
Yeah, it was tough because I think naturally both of us don't. I'm a doer. I think she's a doer as well. I'd say between both of us, she would be more apt to ask for help. I don't ask for help much because in my mind, for the most part, and generally how I think is if someone else can do it, I can do it, and that's how I usually approach life in general. And with this, this is an entirely different ballgame because not only could I not do it for her, it's not something that you can just call a friend and say, hey, how did you do this? So it was tough for the both of us in that sense. For me, it was tough because I can say in my mind, you know what, we need answers. I can get those answers, but those answers needed to be correct. I needed to make sure I got those answers from the right people. I can't just go to Google and say, well, what WebMD says we do this. And that's usually, if we're in an argument or if we need to know something, I'll go search online. I'll find my answer. But with something like this, there's no A equals B answer. There's no answer. You need to kind of talk to somebody with experience, talk to a professional. And we kind of have to get out of ourselves in that sense and reach out for active help rather than saying, no, we'll find the answer ourselves. So that was tough at the beginning for me mostly. And for her, I'm not the best communicator when it comes to emotions. I've come a long way since then, but yeah, being able to be open with your emotions, it's hard to ask for help, but it's even harder to ask for help when you're not being fully forthright with what you need. And that's part of the emotional piece you have to share too. You have to open up. So beyond the words, people can understand how you're feeling and know how to help you, because you may not know how to ask. And that's something that I didn't really know how to ask for. So yeah, that was a struggle. I think we're approaching 5 years in December removed from diagnosis. So I mean, we've grown a lot since then, both through the treatment, we went through everything, chemo, well, double mastectomy, chemo, radiation, back to back to back. We got
No, I'm
diagnosed in
good. I'm
December,
good.
started treatment in January. So everything was, I feel like everything was high speed. Because of her age, we needed to start quickly because there's not much stats for a 27-year-old coming down with cancer. So the doctors like to do everything quickly. So it was learning on the fly was essential. There was no take a break before we started any treatment. Let's wait a few months and talk about it. Where our options was just jump in and figure things out as you go.
Jason, when I think of your situation, so Jason had a toddler at home when his wife, Nicole, was diagnosed with breast cancer, and she was also pregnant. And so his situation was, very vulnerable children, little kids, not self-sufficient, couldn't keep themselves busy. I'm assuming that was a major role reversal for you, although you're young enough to, I'm sure you were the most perfect, awesome, active dad, but still, it's not what you had planned.
Yeah, so you set the stage for mine. Nicole was 36. She was 7 months pregnant, and we had a 2-year-old at home. And we really had no idea, obviously no idea a diagnosis was coming. And from the day she was diagnosed, she was in surgery in 2 weeks, pregnant in surgery. So for us, getting into the process, the weird thing was like, we didn't even have time to process what was happening or about to happen to us. We met with the doctor, and they were like, by the time I met with the doctor 2 days in, they already had the surgery scheduled. They had 3 surgeons in the room because they have to watch the baby. She had a single mastectomy because she was pregnant, so they wanted to accelerate the healing so that she could then give birth 5 weeks later. So I guess to compare to what the gentleman just was saying, one thing I realized, I've never had the perspective of sharing with folks like this in a group. We were really lucky that we somehow realized we're going to need every bit of help we can get. Part of that had to do with the social worker at MGH in Waltham. I wish I could remember her name because I was trying to think of it.
Nova.
Nova. It was Nova.
She's
So
wonderful.
Nova met with us day 3 when I went in with Nicole to meet with the doctor. And, she started talking about Ellie Fund and this and that. And I really had no sense, I'd never even been close to somebody with cancer, never mind my pregnant wife. So I had no idea what I was getting into, but something just told me I'm going to need a lot of help. So yeah, needless to say, she had the surgery. 5 weeks later, they induced our baby 4 weeks early so that they could get the chemo started as soon as possible because she was stage 2B. So it's like kind of right on that cusp. She started chemo a week after she gave birth with an infant at home. So, what we ended up figuring out, and Nicole also is a nurse, by the way.
All right.
So one thing I was lucky was from the medical standpoint, I knew, she might bounce something off of me, but I don't work in the medical field. So any information, I was just, a sounding board, but really offered no added value to digesting all the medical information that was tossed at us. But like I said, we knew we were going to need every bit of help. And Nicole, I think with Nova's help, came up with, we're going to need help with the baby, because how do you care for a baby when you're in chemo? So what we came up with pretty quickly was we needed nighttime help, which to me, it's unbelievable. But when I first heard it, it sounded extreme to me. It sounded a little bit unnecessary. I don't know why it sounded unnecessary, because in retrospect, it was the best thing ever. So everything that came at us was very physical. You know, the Ellie Fund supported us with a donation that we put towards physically having somebody in our house. I think it was 3 nights a week for like 3 months that we had the night help. And we had family, our family that was close by was at our house. Her mom was at the house all the time. And then somebody in town organized a meal train. So for 3 months, we had constant food coming to our house. Everything was so physical. I will say the one thing as a caregiver that I realized I really fell short after months was the mental side of it. Like, again, I say, like, we weren't able to process the situation. We were months into it before we started feeling the effects, because it happened so fast. So in a weird way, she got through the chemo not that bad. You know, we had so much help. She actually got through the 5 months of chemo not too bad. It was further down the road that it caught up with us a little bit, sort of mentally and emotionally. But I'm sure it would have been, you know, it would have been worse. I don't know what we would have done without the help with the Ellie Fund and some other groups in town that just pitched in and helped us put together this plan to get through it. Again, I say the luckiest thing we did was we just knew whatever anybody offered, we were going to take it. And it was all necessary.
I'm really glad to hear you say that. Nikki, I would love for you to jump in about specifically what you've been learning now that you're here about the resistance to accept help, which you would think everyone would wake up saying, we need this, we need that, we need that. But the truth is, Nikia, you have some experience on accepting help.
Well, even my mom, the patient navigator had to like drill it to her a few times before she said, okay, I'm going to accept this help. Now that I'm talking with patients, the other day I had a conversation, I couldn't even get everything out. And she was like, nope, I don't need it. I don't want it. Give it to someone else. That's what I get. Give it to someone else. They deserve it more than I do. And it's because I think as women, that's what we do. We just try to give to other people, or we're like, well, we have family members or caretakers that would help us along. And there might be someone who's less fortunate than us that doesn't need it. But in reality, at that point, yes, you probably don't need it, but bills come in, things happen, especially with children. I had a young child and I almost didn't let him go to daycare so that I could save that money to use for something else, because I knew that I couldn't be able to be out of work and then also pay for childcare. So at the time, you don't realize, a lot of us don't realize you don't need the help, but you actually do. And once I started talking and explaining, well, you know, you may not feel well and you might need a meal delivery. So why not that, or the oncology massages? And some people take it and some people still say no, but at least they understand that, you know, there's no status. It's just you needing help at that moment in time.
And even when, you know, we hear this all the time, and I'm sure you can all relate, these are fully employed and fully insured people. And that financial piece hits so fast, sometimes before the side effects. And Sandy, I'm sure you would agree that in a treatment plan, when doctors focus on a treatment plan, and that's their job, they need to be laser focused on that. There isn't really a conversation about, is anything going to prevent you from accessing this treatment? Sandy, I would love to hear your thoughts on that.
No, and access to treatment and access for resources that help families get through treatment are often the critical point in people being able to do treatment. I have folks that come down from Maine for their treatment, and without the support of funds like the Ellie Fund or Friends or GoFundMe, sometimes it would be impossible for people to get to care. And you know, I have seen people who, because they needed to work, try to work, you know, sort of full time through chemo, and you know, chemo can really kick your butt, and you know, it's really hard to do the self-care that's most helpful. Also for family members, you know, sometimes taking some time off so that you can be going through the process with your loved one, it can be really, really important. I want to get back to something that Jason said also earlier, because I think it is so true when I talk on a daily basis with patients and with family members, that when cancer happens, it happens quickly, and you get into treatment and you learn this new language so quickly, and you don't have often time in the beginning and through much of treatment to process the emotions around it. That a lot of times that happens after treatment or after surgery or after chemo, or when there's a lull in between. So the emotional processing often gets way delayed, in part because you're about getting through, how do we get the kids, how do we get the meals, how do we support through treatment? And so the emotional parts often will go to the, you know, sort of back burner.
So as a provider, do you work with the caregivers directly? I mean, I was really struck by what Chin said, that he didn't have a group like this to talk to. And I want to revisit that in a little bit, because that's something we hope to provide. But what's out there for caregivers,
So
like talking, you know?
Most cancer centers have social workers that are part of the cancer center, and they're there to meet with patients and their families, or just the families, or just the patients. So we're there to try to support sort of patients and families as they go through treatment. And most cancer centers have pretty adequate sort of resources in that way. But the groups, there are some really groups that for families of cancer patients that meet. There's one group through Facing Cancer Together. It's a virtual group, and I hear really, really good things about the group. And it's not just breast cancer, it's all different types of cancer. So I don't know right now any direct caregiver support group for breast cancer, but I think there are some differences between different kinds of cancers and that impact caregivers differently. So my hope is that more groups will be available. And there are some other caregivers, oh my God, in Western, it's a garden.
The Healing Garden.
The Healing Garden, they do some caregiver groups out there too. And, you know, again, most groups are virtual these days. Good.
Nicole, would you have joined a support group for caregivers through this experience, or would you have been too busy, too tired? You know, you're working full time. What would that have looked like?
Yeah, I think in the moment it would have, I don't know if I would have. I do think there's this element of like, you're just so deep in it. Your head is buried in the sand, working full time, taking care of, you know, your family member, attempting to take care of yourself. And then sometimes doing the extra, the groups just seemed like one more thing. And sometimes that one more thing was just too much. And so I could have seen where it would have been helpful. But I do also think there's this element of you are not, because I couldn't find anything that was specific to breast cancer caregiver support. Like people don't quite understand what you're going through. And sometimes it's really hard. I think it seemed like more work to sit and try to explain to someone what you're going through rather than just connecting with other people who already understand. And so I think that was part of why I think I found some things that were just kind of more broad caregiver support groups. And I'm like, I don't feel like sitting here and trying to explain this to somebody else. But if there was something, if I could have gotten my head out the sand a little bit, I think that would have been helpful. But there is just so much going on that sometimes it's hard to take a step back.
Kristen, we always hear from our patients about saying that they didn't really know what they needed until, we sort of told them what we think is helpful. What's your reaction to, not knowing what you need? And then, we don't offer everything. We try to do what we can. What's the patient reaction like?
Well, it's been very interesting. In the past couple years, I've had met a few patients refer, like I had one patient refer her son to run the Falmouth Rotaries for us last year. She said to her son, I think this is a great group. You should run for them and raise money. You want to do something to help. And I ended up calling her and asking her, would she be interested in services? And she said, oh, I don't think it's really for me. So a lot of times people just don't think it's for them. And then once we explain it, often they do say, I think it's for them once they've been in it a little while, because like Jason said, you can't tell somebody about this the first day, the first week. It just doesn't sink in. So once they realize what they're going through, and it takes a while, and with the Ellie Fund services, we don't need to start it right away. You're in treatment for, not just 3 months, which often we have 3-month and 6-month grants. You can start your grant when you say, okay, I'll start it when I'm going through chemo, because I think that's when I'm really going to need prepared meals for my family. So once we explain how that is, and we had another person whose friends are doing a fundraiser for her, and they found the Ellie Fund. And so I ended up calling the patient to say, your friends are doing this fundraiser for you, but we'd love to help you. So it's interesting how people, we always think everyone should know about us, but they don't. So this is why we want all of you to spread the word about what we do. But I also had breast cancer in 2002. And I remember like thinking that I felt great that morning. And then the doctor called, and all of a sudden I feel like I have the flu. So like like your life just get turned upside down and you don't realize it. So it's an incredible thing, especially I can, as a mom, you're the one taking care of everyone. So what's going to happen? But I was someone who did accept help. I did not know about the Ellie Fund, unfortunately, but I let my friends drive me to appointments and make food for my family. But it's
so you and Rowan both had 4 kids while this breast cancer treatment was happening. Rowan, we need to hear how you managed the bandwidth to take care of 4 kids and yourself, which I know you didn't take care of yourself, and your wife.
Luckily the kids were a little older. Kieran was 16, 17 at the time. So she was driving already. So she was a big help. She could take her sisters to soccer practice or bring them home from soccer practice and that kind of thing. So I was in a pretty good situation where the kids were able to take care of themselves, able to amuse themselves, if I needed them to, so I think that was an easy thing. With my schedule as a firefighter working, 24-hour shifts, I've been home a lot anyway since the kids have been born. So, I mean, kind of taking care of the kids wasn't a new thing for me anyway, because with Kim working night shifts and working multiple days in a row, she would basically be absent for those 4 days because she would go to work, come home, go to sleep, get up, go to work. So I had a pretty good handle on taking care of them and a good relationship with them as well, because I spend so much time with them anyway.
And because they're awesome, your kids are amazing.
I appreciate that. Yeah, they are pretty amazing. I will agree.
Nikia, your experience is also super interesting because you were the caregiver and then you became the patient. And in a very short amount of time. And I'd love for you to share with everyone, you know, what you learned being a caregiver and then what you learned being a patient that could help caregivers, because you really did both.
Yes, so I was really into it and I had to take a step back and allow others to take on that responsibility. It was hard for me, but I knew I needed to do it because the thing is, with I can relate with Nicole, like that's your mom. So you're used to your mom doing everything, and then you have to turn around and be that caretaker for them. So what I did, because she felt helpless when it was my turn to go through treatment, and I moved, stayed in with her for the first couple of weeks, and I allowed her to do little things. She couldn't really do much, but to allow her to feel like she was helping me helped her. And I think that helped her get through it. So it'd be little things like if she felt well, she would cook breakfast. She would tend to me if I needed to help assistance getting up. So those little things meant a lot to her. And I allowed her to be the mother because she was not the mother for such a long time. So she was diagnosed in 2010 and then it metastasized in 2014. And then I was diagnosed in 2018. So it was a short period of time. And when I was going through treatment, she was going through chemotherapy. So it was tough, but I had to let her be a mother and let her be my caretaker, even though she didn't do much, but it was enough for her to satisfy her. So I think that is important to allow them, because in the beginning I used to baby her a lot and I could see she was frustrated, and you have to allow them to do normal things. If they feel well that day, allow them to wash dishes, to clean up, to take walks, you know, just those little things, because they already feel lost that they can't do the things that they used to be able to do. So that is very important, even as husbands, as children, that we have to just allow them to do the things that they were doing when they were well.
You're talking about normalcy,
Yes,
giving them a sense of normalcy.
exactly.
Yeah.
Great words, Nikia. Really good words.
Thank you.
Sandy, advice for self-care for these amazing people that, even though this may have been a long time ago, some people are really in it. There's also a lot of, you know, I heard the term the other day, scan-anxiety, where when the next scan comes up and that those feelings of fear, you know, leading up to them. I'd love for you to give you've been in this business for so long, you're such an expert, some advice.
Yeah, I think no matter where someone is in a cancer journey, pacing is really important. And it's a marathon, not a sprint. And it doesn't matter if it's a curable disease or metastatic disease, it's still a long journey. And I work with patients who are 20 years out. I also am a cancer survivor. I had breast cancer back in 1999. And even though cancer is much more in the backseat all these years later, it's still there, and I still go for labs and I still see the oncologist, and so it never goes away. I think certainly right after initial treatment, or for someone who's dealing with metastatic disease, anytime you're getting scans or they're getting pictures of things, anxiety is going to be up. And so really, I work with folks around, you know, even a month before, and kind of thinking of self-care as you get closer to scans. as you get closer to next doctor's visits and stuff like that are really important. I think, diet, exercise, rest, sleep is really, really, really important. And, patients talk all the time about waking up in the middle of the night thinking about, oh my God, I have to have my sort of breast MRI next week and those kinds of things. So sort of helping people to develop strategies. Your mind may go there, but how do you bring it back to what you know? That you've been through treatment, your body's responded well, one step at a time. And I often will use language with people, deal with a recurrence if and when it happens, not in anticipation of. Deal with disease that's progressed, or if treatment stops working for someone dealing with metastatic disease, deal with it when it happens, not in advance, because a lot of times you hear and talk with patients who get so paralyzed by stuff that it prevents them from doing the stuff each day that is living their lives. And so be present. We talk a lot about mindfulness and that, be where your feet are, be where your butt is. Try to be as present as you can, because that can prevent the anxiety of, sort of where people go in their head. It can quiet that a lot.
Really good advice. The mindfulness piece is like, you hear it everywhere, but I wish there was like a mindfulness for dummies. Like, I don't really even know what it means. I like what you just said about be present where your feet are, where your butt is. I think like maybe offering patients, we're always looking for stuff for our patients after the grants are over, like mindfulness training, maybe that is something we should be offering. I'd love to hear what these caregivers, what you all wished we had done that we didn't. We don't want accolades. We want to get better. So was there something else we could do?
Honestly, what Sandy just said about the recurrence, Nicole's barely 2 years out, so we're still dealing with that. She found a lump last month, and we had 3 days of anxiety. So that, just like the initial diagnosis, that was something we had not prepared or thought about dealing with. So for 3 days, we were on pins and needles. We're lucky it was only 3 days. It was from Friday to a Monday. But that struck me right there.
It's never far, because you just don't know. And, most people don't get cancer, but yet everyone on this Zoom session has had to either personally deal with cancer or have someone that they really love and care about deal with cancer. And for many people, especially younger people, who are pregnant or have a young child at home, it's that much more challenging, because it's also happens at a time that you're not supposed to be sick, especially if you're a healthy young nurse or a healthy young whatever. It's, it happens at a time that you don't expect it to. And Jason, what you just said, it can, like there could be a lump, and, a lot of times breasts are lump, not all lumps are cancers, but the what it triggers for both patients and for family members is like, oh, it's like it can take your breath away.
Also, I used to get caught up in the marker numbers. I was so obsessed with the marker numbers, and I had to step back and say, stop it. You're gonna worry yourself to death about it. And I just found other ways of dealing with it. But to your question, Meredith, and it may not necessarily be something that you guys could have done, but the psychological piece of it, no one really seeks therapy during treatments for caregivers or the patients. So I think therapy would have helped a lot to deal with the different things. So you don't have that anxiety if someone finds a lump, or the marker levels might be lower this week than they were the prior week. So as I said, I'm not sure if that's like an Ellie fund thing, but I just think more people should seek out therapy during this time when their patients or caregivers have to deal with cancer diagnosis.
And I think it's not just therapy, because, I mean, I do a lot of therapy with people, but, sometimes just stopping down for a visit in the chemo area, or running, sitting with a patient in a waiting room, that sometimes some of those more informal interactions are so much more helpful and supportive than the 50-minute sort of therapy sessions. Because a lot of times people who are in the middle of cancer treatment or just finished cancer treatment don't have the time to invest. So it's hot, and I wish we could see every patient that comes in, because again, a cancer diagnosis, it rocks your world, and it's, different people need different things. And so some people, it's about reclaiming sort of their body. If someone's been very active and athletic, it's continuing to do some of those things as you heal from treatments and those kinds of things. But everyone is a little bit different in what they need. And so just having treatment and support more available, and it's like some people say, oh, I didn't even know there was a social worker at the hospital in their 6 month of treatment. I'm like, it's trying to get through to the docs. Please refer people's, because it's really a helpful thing to have an outlet. And a lot of times it's not more all the psychological stuff, but it's also the fears of, sort of treatment not being successful and how that will impact family members, or worried about how the kids are going to deal with mom losing their hair, or how a spouse is going to feel about the physiologic changes after a mastectomy. All, there's so many different layers. And for some people, again, that stuff comes years down the road, but for other people, that's more present. And so, we're available sort of to meet with patients and families years down the road, after they're out of treatment, if people are having more anxiety around a particular issue related to their cancer. But it's hard.
Does anybody think that Ellie, like people that are caregivers in our community, would that be a more comfortable place to start? Should we have opportunities for you all to get together and talk? Would you go? What would be helpful?
I think so. I think when you're being diagnosed too, and I'm not a caregiver, obviously, but I hadn't been to anything that Zoom that Ellie had done, and I received the invite today and I wanted to come. I was a supporter before I became sick. I'm a huge supporter now. So
we're so glad you're here.
Well, I love you guys. So, and I did get oncology massages and they were amazing, but I had to be talked into it too. It was like, we have a double income family. I have 3 sons. I have a son in college, but you could still make a really great living and get cancer and have great health insurance and worry, I mean, but I think the struggle for us here, and I think COVID puts a lot of pressure on everybody. I think it's easing now, but we were all home when I found out that I had breast cancer last March. And I think it's like the changing story. Like, okay, when I first got the call that I had breast cancer, I had, a mass. Then it was in my lymph nodes, and it sort of changed the whole treatment. Like, you're going to have a mastectomy. No, you're going to have chemo first. And, don't go on the internet. Don't, but you're like, you have no idea what's coming at you. And you have all these people that love you that are just trying to be supportive of you, but you have no answers. And it's really hard to like maneuver through it. And even like in the Facebook support groups. There's one for Massachusetts, which is like probably the best one that I'm in. People go to Facebook and say, I just got my results back. I have cancer in my lymph nodes. What's next? I'm like, you're a patient at Dana-Farber. This should be sent in patient gateway to your doctor. Like, you should not be relying on somebody else's breast cancer experience to get answers. That's very scary. So I don't know if there's a way to, I know that breast cancer is, there's 3,500 kinds, and I understand all those things, but I feel like there could be maybe like sort of a map that says, if this happens, maybe you're going to go this way. And I don't know. I was pretty surprised when I went to meet with my oncologist at Dana-Farber after my biopsy, and he put his hand on my side, felt my lymph nodes. I went down for an immediate biopsy of my lymph nodes, and my whole treatment changed that day. I was planning on having surgery, and then I went into, 7 months of chemo. So it's just hard. It's discouraging. And I always say to my oncologist, no rainbows and unicorns, just give it to me
straight up.
Yeah, I don't want the rainbows and unicorns. And I begged him. I think with radiation, they have to kind of do that because people just wouldn't do it. But I'm a professional. I have a college degree. I have 3 kids, a kid in college.
Nobody saves for breast cancer.
But I'm worldly. I didn't know what a port was. I didn't look at my port till it was healed. I do not want to see that thing. I don't care what it is. Now I'm like, oh my God, I love my port. It's the best thing I ever got in my life. I'm not going to hang it on my Christmas tree, but I do love it.
So is it possible that, I would love for you all to go back to the people that you took care of and just let them know that we do have a new group called Ellie Talks, and it's just for Ellie Fund patients. And it is moderated by an actual social worker who also had breast cancer, who's volunteering her time. It is a lot of different kinds of people there with every different stage and every different socioeconomic group. And we just want there to be a place and sometimes I think if everyone has the Ellie Fund in common, at least they're not walking into a group where they don't know anyone. I mean, we feel like we know your families, I mean, we really feel like we know your families. So we hope that you'll encourage them, and that, if you do think of things that would have been helpful, reach out to us. You have our emails. We don't want to keep static. We want to keep growing, and you're the best people out there to let us know what would really help. So I would just like to thank you all for being here. And, if there's any last comments, I would love for it not to be me that's making the last comment tonight. Chin, hook it up.
I guess I've been thinking as I've been listening, and I think to get back to your question regarding suggestions for the Ellie Fund, I think as many individuals have said, it's tough when you're going through it to ask for help. It's tough to even if there's someone or people waiting to help you, it's tough to organize all the stuff you need to get done, whether it's appointments, whether it's house stuff, and then find time to make help. That help becomes an appointment. That help becomes me extending myself or the patient extending themselves outside of the mountain of things that they already have on their list to do, to ask for help. So I think that the most important thing is just being present, knowing that it wasn't until after we were done with radiation that we said, okay, let's reach out to the Ellie Fund for some help. And it's almost like once you're through with everything, you have that chance to take a deep breath. So it's not necessarily pushing while you're in the treatment to saying, hey, we're Ellie Fund, we're here. You want help? It's just kind of just being present. I don't know exactly how that would look like in I don't know, an advertisement or how that would look, just speaking off the cuff now. But I think just knowing that that resource is there for when I'm ready for that
For
resource.
when you're ready. I love that.
Yeah, I guess to that point, the only other thing I would add, and I mean, this is a pie in the sky, probably idea, but part of what I struggled with getting help from my mom is there was, you know, a lot of, and we were originally starting in Pennsylvania, so we weren't even in Massachusetts and connected to the Ellie Fund, but kind of to Chinadu's point, there's like work that goes into even getting the help. So there's these applications and people are asking for all types of things from you to just even be able to access the help. And I know at the Ellie Fund, like we try to make that as easy as possible for the patients, but sometimes I just wonder, is there a way to like just proactively give a patient something, at least in the upfront, until they have the capacity to apply for more, just because whether it's the patient or the caregiver doing it, like there were some applications, I remember when my mom first got diagnosed, they sat on my desk for 4 months because I just could not mentally take the time, and we could have used the help. It was groceries, it was transportation, gas, all the things that would have definitely been helpful, but I didn't have the brain capacity to fill out an application. And so if there's a way to be proactive, you know, and get things, you know, the things that we need to track and all that good stuff after the fact, maybe that'd be really helpful.
Hadassah, do you know Hadassah?
We do.
Oh, yeah. So she was really great with my applications. She pretty much did as much as she could do and just told me, call me, email me, whatever you need. You know, she helped me as much as she could and took them as far as she could. And then we completed the rest.
Yeah.
Nakia, you've got to talk about what our
That's huge.
aspiration is.
Self-referrals.
Oh,
That's
wow.
what we're looking for to eliminate, because we're noticing too, there's a shortage in the hospitals. I'm sure, Sandra, you can attest to that. And so having self-referrals directly, having the patients reach out to us, that would eliminate a lot. I've only been on here for about a month with the organization for about a month. And I have called patients myself and went over the application I did one today. And just going over the basic questions we need to get it started for them. So that is our goal, is to have a patient self-referral so we can eliminate navigators, social workers. I mean, the social workers will still need, but at least, like you're saying, Nicole, if you would have been able to just call, right, instead of trying to fill out all those applications, it might have been a little bit easier.
But you do need to be reminded, like my son did a walk for the Ellie Fund when he was in 7th grade. He's graduating from college this year. I'm diagnosed with breast cancer. I know he did that, but I didn't remember like reach out to the Ellie Fund, you know? But I tell everybody now, like when my company does stuff for birthdays and stuff, they all give to the Ellie Fund and then the company matches it. And yeah, it's like, I mean, anything that anybody wants to give me, I say, give it to the Ellie Fund. I mean, and anybody that has breast cancer that I know, I didn't know about that it reached into Maine though. I thought it was only Massachusetts. So.
Well, we should end on that note, that if you ever hear of anyone who is going through breast cancer, truly the only requirements are that you are in current treatment, and that you either live in Massachusetts or you're being treated here. So family and friends of yours in Rhode Island, you know, Connecticut, Maine. At one point, we would have like, I would say 10 different patients from outside of Massachusetts at any given time. And the other thing is, you know, that we one day really hope to have our own navigation team so that we can work with patients one-on-one, like what you're saying, Nicole, or we say to them, okay, you may not need us now, but we hear post-surgery things get hairy. Or, you know, Jason, we had a patient who had a baby and she really didn't need meal delivery up front. She needed housekeeping, or, you know, whatever it is that we learn from all of you. I mean, for us, you are, you know, just not only the inspiration for sure, but just a wealth of information about how to get better. So I hope now that you know us a little bit better, and we not just bumping into you at a gala or at a road race or, you know, at work, you'll stay in touch and just know that we just adore all of you and we thank you for being such great caregivers to these patients. They need you and they love you and we do too.
I think continuing to do events like tonight and then the other group for patients, I think doing those kinds of things, it will, again, just increase the dialogue and discussion about what's helpful and what's not, and so that people can know that there's additional support or additional services or resources that might be helpful. So I think continuing to do these kinds of things would be really a good idea.
We're looking at you, Sandy. Thanks everyone for joining.
Kristen, could
Thank
we
you.
get in the
Nice
email
meeting everyone.
information regarding the patient group, the active patient group you talked about?
Yes, yeah, I'll send you the information. I'll send everyone on this call the information on that.
Awesome. Yeah, I think Alyssa would certainly love to.
Oh, we would love to have her.
It's-
And
It's a new group. I was on the first one to organize it, and it's a nice group of people, and it's nice. It's once a month, and it just gives, and it's just some of the same people come back, so it's like people got to know each other in the first few groups, and everyone's story is different, and everyone walks away learning something, and it's nice if maybe if some people haven't told their story before. Some people are new to it, so yeah, it's definitely worth trying. I do recommend it.
Yeah, she was going in that she actively and post treatment, she was in a group, but COVID kind of shut that down and then it went virtual. So I think at this stage she's at the point where she wants to share.
Yeah.
Not much so needing any help or resource, but she loves to share and help others. I mean, just to add quickly, so much so that she did a whole career change because of the physical therapist she had, oncology physical therapist that
Wow.
she had and loved, made her want to go to physical therapy. So now she's back in the school
Oh,
for physical
Wow.
therapy,
That's good.
and she's getting her yoga certification. She's already finished 200 hours and working on her 300-hour yoga certification, all because of physical therapy, a few physical therapy appointments
That's
she
awesome.
had. So
That
yeah,
is
I think
so
she'd love to
amazing.
share.
And
Yeah, I
actually,
think
that's a
she'd love to
service we're talking about is we've been hearing a lot about physical therapy oncologists, like specifically, and how important they are to
Mhm.
healing after surgery. And so if those are out-of-pocket costs for patients, we would very much like to cover that. So we'll keep learning from all of you. And yeah, that's amazing.
Sorry, I have another
No, go-
suggestion that just popped in our mind regarding so yeah, she's doing a yoga. She working on a yoga certification. She's finished her 200 hours. She's working on 300, and part of that 300-hour part of that course is teaching a yoga session. And her long-term dream is to be a yoga instructor for oncology patients. So she has to do 3 yoga sessions, volunteer sessions. And I think if
we'll take them.
something could be
All
organized
three.
with Ellie,
yeah.
she'd
we'll
love to.
find people.
We have lots of
Awesome.
yogis. That's amazing.
Awesome.
Good
That's
for
I'll
great.
take the
her.
word. That's
Oh,
great.
please. All right, well, we'll let you get back to your families and thank you so much for being with us tonight. It was a real honor. And everybody be well and happy. Talk to you soon.
Thank
Great.
you.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye.
Thanks.
Thank you so much.
Thanks.